Thank you so much for joining today's talk. Miranda and I are part of the product management team for dashboards at Splunk, and we're really excited to give you an update about Splunk Dashboards. As always, we have to include there are some forward-looking statements in these slides, and so you just keep that in mind as we go through our presentation. So today we're going to go through a couple of topics. First, we'll talk about Splunk Dashboard Studio, which includes the new dashboarding framework out of the box, part of search and reporting. We'll talk about what are some of the key features that you can expect, and then what are some items that we're looking at for our kind of short to medium term roadmap. And then Miranda will talk about how you can actually extend the underlying dashboard framework and walk us through a demo. So I'm really excited to announce that Splunk Dashboard Studio is going to be available as part of search and reporting. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why we made this investment into this new dashboarding framework and why it was so important for us to make sure that we made it available as part of search and reporting. On the left-hand side, you can see an example of a simple XML dashboard. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example of a Studio dashboard. And when you look at what's on the left-hand side, you can see that there's not a lot of flexibility in the layout. There's not a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to customize how the visualizations look. And if you have any experience with simple XML dashboards, you know that while it is extensible and you can achieve those customizations, it does require a lot of time and effort to do all of that custom development. And then, of course, you run the risk of things breaking between upgrades. So what we've done is take a lot of those capabilities or those desired capabilities and package them directly into Dashboard Studio. So now things like having custom layouts or adjusting how visualizations look are all natively native capabilities of the new dashboarding framework. So if you had ever played around with the Splunk Dashboard beta app from Splunk Base, what we did was we just took that app, we enhanced a lot of those capabilities and visualizations, and then we packaged it right into search and reporting. So with Splunk Cloud, it'll be available with 8.1.2103, which has already started to roll out to production. And then for on-prem customers, this will be available with Splunk Enterprise 8.2. Some of the key Dashboard Studio features to look out for when you're getting started with Studio is obviously the flexible layout option. So if you haven't already had a chance to play with the beta app, you'll see that you now have two layout options to select from whenever you're creating a dashboard. One is absolute layout, which you can think of as like a free-form canvas for pixel perfect positioning. So you can place objects wherever you want, resize them however you'd like, and even layer things on top of each other. The other option is grid layout. Grid layout is a little bit more akin to what you see in simple XML, where you can very quickly align and place charts, except you have a lot more flexibility now in resizing and restructuring the layout of those visualizations. We also have native support for new types of visualization, such as images. This includes both background images for your dashboard, as well as images that you just place on the dashboard. Icons, text boxes, shapes, lines, and choropleth SVGs. So there's a lot of really great things that you can now build with your dashboards. And then we know that it's been a common complaint with simple XML that anytime you try to export the dashboard, it doesn't maintain the look and feel. So that was a high priority for us to fix. And so now we do support on-demand PNG and PDF export that maintains the dashboard look and feel. And finally, you'll see a lot of really great improved UX for being able to do more configurations in the UI. So that's not only adding data sources, adding visualizations, or adding inputs, but you can even view snippets of the source code directly in the UI. And this is really helpful when you're trying to configure something and you want to see what the source code looks like, or if you want to make changes directly to the source code without actually having to flip to the source code view, find your visualization, make the changes there. Some of the key things that we are thinking about on our roadmap is more advanced token and drill down functionality. And what I mean by this is with Dashboard Studio in this first release, you'll notice that we have a lot of basic functionality that's in place. And we felt that it was more important for us to be able to release sooner with some basic functionality and then build on it rather than wait till we had every last bell and whistle. So we'll be working on enhancing those capabilities so that they're more similar to what you're familiar with from Simple XML. We'll also be working on enhancing our visualization. So once you get started with Studio, you'll see, for example, with the single value visualizations, table visualizations, and Choropleth SVG visualizations, there's a lot of really great flexibility in terms of what types of configurations you can do. And so we're going to be bringing that to all of the other visualizations as well. And then we will just continue to put more UI into the dashboarding experience so that it's easier for not only you, but also for other maybe less technical folks to be able to build really visually compelling dashboards in the new framework. And then finally, but definitely not least, we're also very excited to be working on scheduling dashboard exports for Studio Dashboards. So now you have these really beautiful dashboards, you want to share them with other people. And so we're working on building in that capability as well. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Miranda, who's going to talk about developing with the underlying dashboard framework.
Thank you, Lizzie. I appreciate that. It's through the latest in Dashboard Studio, and I am happy to talk a little bit about the underlying framework. We definitely have gotten some questions so far, right? I see this experience shipping out of the box with Enterprise. It's starting to light up in my environment. I'm on Enterprise Cloud. I got a preview for my SC of the next version coming on-prem. And now I want to know, how can I extend this, right? I'm used to developing applications, either just for my business or for publishing to Splunk base. Like, is this something that I can actually use? And the short answer is yes. And I'm going to walk you through kind of a couple of the extension points, as well as point you to a few resources. I will give you a heads up that, this is just like any other framework. We version it, of course, but there can be breaking changes between major versions. We do include a migration guide, so keep that in mind in everything I'm saying today. And please always look at the latest dashboard docs before going too far. So what do we provide? We actually publish a package called Splunk Dashboard Core. And that's published over NPM. Every time we release a new version, we are pushing out a change there. Semantically version packages. So if you do see kind of a major version bump, there can be some breaking changes. We do provide migration guidance. But the important thing to kind of realize here is that we're actually leveraging modern front-end technologies. We're using React and Redux, and also for the dashboard definitions, we're using JSON instead of XML. A couple other things to kind of be aware of is that this is very modular. All of our dependencies are resolved at build time. And that makes it very easy to plug and play with custom layouts, visualizations, etc. Of course, as Lizzie mentioned, we're very cognizant of the fact that we want to provide a robust experience out of the box in the core enterprise dashboards. But we're also aware that we have a really active and really fantastic developer base, some of whom are probably watching this video right now in the B-Sides group. So we want to make sure that we're also enabling you to kind of tell the stories that you need to build the applications that you need to. One other thing to be aware of this framework is that it is platform agnostic. We as the dashboard framework will provide data sources that are specific to running enterprise searches. You'll see kind of the same ones that are in enterprise, just a regular ad hoc search, base and chain search, or what was formerly known as base and post process. If it was a development for SCS, Splunk's new cloud services platform, there's kind of a core basic search, core basic data source provided there as well. But we're also very aware that customers, internal customers of ours and external customers, and I am speaking of developers right now, have varying data needs. So this framework can actually be used to query data against any source. As long as you can query it, you can authenticate as that data store requires, you can get the data back and you can display that in your dashboard. So internal teams are doing this already. They're using custom data sources to hit REST APIs, return data from a variety of different locations, and kind of visualize it all in one single pane of glass. So I do want to talk a little bit about customizations. Basically, let me switch out of slides for a moment. It's always easier to kind of talk to what a dashboard is when we look at the definition. So for those of you who may not have dug in too deeply yet on the new framework, if you come in here, you'll notice that it is just a JSON definition, and there are a few kind of key components. The first is visualizations. You'll notice that all visualizations have type and options that you can set. You can also connect those to a data source. Those data sources also have a type. So this is DS search, one of the standard ones we provide. But if there was a custom one written, it would be DS, Miranda's search or Miranda's REST API. And then you can provide a set of options, whether that's a query, or if this was a DS chain search, you could provide a prop called extend that extends a base search. And then, of course, that is referenced, this ID is referenced by the visualization to indicate that this search is going to power that visualization. You'll also notice that there's a layout section. And in this layout section, there's a type. We support both grid and absolute layouts, but I'm going to talk to this in a little bit. We also allow for developers using the framework to write their own custom layouts. So we've seen some really great examples of folks already kind of starting to build multi-page dashboards where there's kind of a set of single values or set of icons or set of words on the left that are scrollable. And then with clicking, you kind of pull up a different different dashboard in the center, which I think is really cool. You'll also notice this section called structure, and you'll notice that here it's referencing those visualizations. So every visualization, in order to show up on the dashboard, can't just be defined in terms of its properties. It also needs to be placed in the structure of the dashboard. You'll also notice that we support inputs. So inputs are just kind of your standard ones that you're familiar with Splunk: time range picker, multi-select, drop-down, text and number is a new one that we've done. We heard that it was a common use case for custom JS, kind of harkening back to what Lizzie said about us really focusing on bringing some of those core capabilities into the framework out of the box. One of the custom JS use cases was modifying the text input to only accept numbers. So we said, well, why don't we just give that capability out of the box? And you'll notice here that these inputs also need to be defined in this global inputs area in the structure in order for them to show up in your dashboard. One thing I do want to also call out, I'm not going to go into it too deeply in this session, but it is, I think, really exciting, is this default section. So you can see here that I can set data sources, and then for all searches of this DS search type, I can set the same options to apply to all of them. This is also a really powerful thing you can do with visualizations. So, I could do visualizations, and I could decide I wanted, all my visualizations to have the same background color, right? So I could do global, background, color, and anyone that has this prop, we can just call it red. Now, if I go back to my dashboard, background color did not turn to red. Let me actually change that because this is a different that table. I forgot we changed this visualization. So you are getting a live demo. But this is how I can kind of start to customize everything, and I can reuse properties. One thing that we were seeing, particularly, thinking about how we came from a world where there were glass tables in simple XML, is that in glass tables, you would actually see, walls of single values that were all reusing the same range values, essentially to set conditional coloring. Now you can set that once and have it apply to all your single values. Now, of course, if you want one to have a certain different logic, you can just set the properties of that one visualization to be different. More specific is always going to win out over more general. So if I have a setting on a table, that would win out over a default on all table visualizations. And if I have a globe, and that table visualization default will win out over any sort of global default for all visualizations. Super powerful. The other thing I do always like to kind of point out is that, one of the nice things that we have here is that you can reuse data sources. So this one single data source that I have here, you can see this is just one. I'm just doing a simple index internal time chart count by source type. I can reuse this with any number of visualizations and inputs. So for example, if I wanted to add a single value, I could very easily leverage that same search. So I'm going to actually cancel out of here because I'm going to pick an existing. So I'm just going to wire that up to search one. And another really fun thing that you can do here is we notice that you can actually select that what data field you want to actually power that single value, which is great because, again, going to a lot of those ITSI use cases or what we've heard otherwise, super bread and butter use case in dashboards to have a table with a lot of detail, but then pull out a few KPIs into single values with some of their own information. And now you can use the same search to power every single one of those, which is really exciting. And that's enough about that. Let me get back now that I've kind of covered a little bit about the dashboard structure and kind of the different elements of it, let me get back to some of the slides and talking through kind of the customization points that might be interesting to you as a developer. So first and foremost, and I kind of alluded to this already, custom layouts. You can extend the base layout component of that package to produce whatever sort of layout you'd like. This is an example concertina layout, but as I mentioned before, we've had some really cool examples where developers have built kind of multi-page dashboards with custom controls for navigating between those pages. And that's been really cool to see. Of course, if you're like, hey, I love grid layout or I love absolute layout, but there's one or two things I'd like to change about it, you could also extend it and make it Miranda's absolute layout or Lizzie's grid layout. All those things are possible, and you can kind of define some custom behaviors. Another common question we get is about custom visualizations, right? Fantastic, you're providing 15, 20, 30, 50 visualizations out of the box one day. There's always going to be something that I want to use specifically to my application. Maybe there is a particular library that you prefer the sand key diagram from. Maybe that there is a particular mapping solution that has exactly the kind of use case that you're looking for. You can certainly bring those into your application that's using this framework. So this is an example of extending to actually just write a custom visualization. It's all React, so any React-based library, if you want to use D3, you can. It's kind of at your fingertips, and that's the solution right now for anything that we don't kind of support out of the box. Over time, we're certainly aware of and exploring options for kind of providing a more stock experience in Dashboard Studio and Enterprise itself. Very aware that not everybody wants to write a custom application just to use a preferred visualization. So we are planning out what we'd like to do there, but today this is kind of the options available. I alluded earlier to custom data sources. So you can see here on the left, this is just an example of a data source that's querying the REST API for the National Weather Service. This is hopefully illustrating that you can query data from literally almost anywhere. The only requirement is that you have to send the data to the search observer in the form of a data set, and you have to properly format the meta object and kind of make sure that you're conforming to the schema. But as long as you do that with the data source, you can return anything you'd like. And you can see here that we're just grabbing that from the Weather API. Lizzie mentioned a little bit about tokens and drill downs, and that we are actively working to bring more of those capabilities that you're used to from a simple XML world into the new framework. That is 100% correct. We are actively working on that right now. But in the meantime, we are aware that there are certainly folks who want to extend the event handlers, extend the event handlers that we provide out of the box and write their own. Right now, we kind of do drill down to custom URL. You can set tokens via inputs. That will be expanding in the coming months. But you can see here that if there was a need in your application to kind of write an event handler specifically right now, you can see that this little snippet, all that this is doing is allowing me to take that value in the cell of this table, and it's setting that token that was originally noted here to just be kind of the basic token. I'm just setting, when you click on the field, that cell value is the event payload cell value. So yeah, event handlers, they're just JavaScript modules that handle dispatched action events. There are two main functions, can handle and handle, which you can see illustrated in this example. I do want to kind of give a little bit of a nod to some of the creativity that we've seen from other folks and hopefully some inspiration. One of the pretty common questions we get from folks who are familiar with the frameworks, ready to push the limits, are, well, what other custom components can I use? What are other people doing? And one of the really cool ones that we've seen kind of come up a couple times is actually time sliders for controlling the time in which to kind of see how data has evolved over time. So you can see there on the left that this is one of the COVID-19 dashboards developed by the Splunk for Good team. And they're using a custom component here for a time slider with playback. And that is actually built upon something that came a little earlier, and this is a little preview of it on the right. This is from a conf session in 2019 that Jeff Hendry and Aditi Nath presented, where they kind of really piloted that time slider behavior in the playback and kind of wrote a custom component to indicate what kind of the art of what was possible. So, definitely want to emphasize that, you're only limited by your creativity. We've seen a ton of awesome stuff coming online so far, and I'm sure we'll continue to see that in the future. So how does it all come together? I've shown you a lot of little snippets, a lot of kind of sample little examples. But this is the great use case that we actually got from one of the folks in our field. And I apologize for the quality on this. Google Slides is not with us today. But what you can see here is actually everything coming together. There's a custom React component for the image viewer on the right. There's event handlers for setting a token based on the click values of a particular table cell that's modifying a search and returning new data. And there's also kind of that custom text widget there where a user of this particular application can actually type in some information and then submit it and modify a backing data store. So very, very cool example. Huge hats off to Tef Koki. He's one of our fantastic of the Paris office or the Paris area during this time. And he wrote a fantastic blog post that I will point you to in a moment. One other thing that I want to give a quick nod to in terms of a developer tool or developer asset that you can leverage, and our our legal team would like me to very much say this is experimental, not officially supported yet, but it is something that has been released on GitHub and that there's a conf session about. I will of course direct you to those resources at the end, but fair warning, this is experimental, not officially supported, but it's still pretty cool. I'm not sure how many of you have seen some of the great work that's been coming out of our Splunk for Good team, really trying to apply data to a number of different important topics. You can see these at the bottom here. There's a kind of a suite of COVID-19 data dashboards that they produced. There was also some dashboards produced around the US election. But what you'll notice is that they were all actually published to a public URL. You didn't have to log into Splunk. There wasn't some global Splunk instance that everybody had to go through some sign up form for. Those were just public URL that anybody could visit. So how did they do that? There's a whole conf session talk on this, so I will point you to that. But the basics are there are some serverless API endpoints. You need to make sure there's access to search results. I will note this is public, unauthenticated, cached. You do have the option to transform those into we call it a DS test, or a particular type of data source that just packages the data right in the dashboard definition, so there aren't active queries. But then you deploy that to a CDN. These dashboards got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views. So certainly that was not all on one node. And then there's a publisher CLI that'll generate all the boilerplate code, dashboard code, optimized assets, and data snapshots that you need. I do want to jump into a little bit of a demo really quickly. I know we talked a little bit about the framework so far in terms of the structure, which is awesome. One thing a couple fun things I want to talk about. One is these new visualizations. So if you come into the dashboard definition, you'll see that this was a Splunk.table. This is a new visualization package that we're moving to under the hood. The visualization team has been doing some really, really awesome work. And you'll notice that if you click on this, I get a lot of that. Let's say I just want to format my, let's see, what's a good one? We'll do the Splunk Web Access column. So I decide I want to format the Splunk Web Access column. Fantastic. Let me edit that. Let's see, unit positions, not super exciting, but let's do dynamic coloring of that text. And you can see here that I'm just going to, let's pick some purpley type of colors. Of course, I could do some custom. We'll add a couple more ranges. Okay, fantastic. So now we can see that these numbers have changed color. They've changed color because we've applied some conditional logic to it. Something that I'm going to dig into that we hope that most users, who are just using UI are like, perfect, I got my numbers to be purple, green, etc. I have the exact outcome I need, so I don't need to go beyond that. But we know that you guys are the B-sides and you want a little bit more under the hood before everybody else. So we're going to jump into this. If you notice here, that Splunk.table, there's actually something pretty cool happening under the hood here. In the options, I'm actually able to format columns by their name. That's all that's happening through the UI. But I could also format them on the basis of a number of different aspects. So first I'm saying, okay, this data, I want to base it off of the table that the table data source. I'm going to search for the series by name, Splunk Web Access. I could also change to series by type if I wanted to. For example, if I had a single value and I was saying, well, just time chart count by KPI, I want to do series by type number. So that means I'll always conditionally color. I'll always display the first numeric column returned, and I'll be able to conditionally color that. And then format by type, and you'll notice this is kind of the editor config that was given here. And same with the row colors. So if you come down here, you can see that we're actually referencing different pieces of this in that it's an actual DSL under the hood. So all of those kind of range values that we set here, we are actually referencing this context in our visualization options, which is really cool. And the other really cool thing is this context right here, if I wanted to make that accessible to every visualization on my dashboard, that's where it comes back to being really interesting in this defaults section, because I could set defaults for visualization, Splunk.table, put this context, or I could make it global if I wanted it to apply to multiple visualization types. And then I can just reference it in range values, Splunk Web Access row config. I can rename this whatever I want. It could be, Miranda. That'll work too. But that is a super, super powerful, I didn't spell my name correctly. That is a super, super powerful capability that's come online that is kind of like peeling an onion. You kind of dig into it more and more, and there's a lot more to learn, a lot more to optimize, and a lot of efficiency that brings to the table. One other thing I want to just kind of speak to a little bit, because I know that, as we're bringing more capabilities online, we get a lot of custom questions around like, hey, are there any workarounds for this not being available yet, that not being available yet? And there are definitely a couple that I want to show you. So actually first, let me just show you what's happening here. I don't want to download that. So we go 50%. So I have just a simple drop-down input here. And you'll notice if I pick a state, I'm actually changing which SVG choropleth visualization shows up. And you can also see that there are different paths within that choropleth being colored. So why am I pointing this out? I think this might be one of my older examples. I hope you guys will forgive me. But what we have here is I'm actually just loading this SVG from an S3 bucket. And important to make sure CORS is enabled, all that's in the documentation. But you'll notice here that I actually named those, the state name _ SVG. So I am just setting a token with the state name, and that is allowing me to then swap which visualizations are being shown, which is really cool. You can also use kind of conditional like drop downs to set tokens to kind of show and hide different icons or SVGs. There's a really great example of that in the examples hub. I'll give a small plug for that, and I'll walk you through that in a second. But that is a really cool kind of nifty way to conditionally show hide different images. Highly recommend taking a look at that. I've also gotten questions around, well, how could I set a token based on a search result right now? Is there any workaround? There actually is. You can add an input, and you can back that input with a data search or a data source, which is just a search. And then if you come down here to the global inputs area, we would just remove that from there. So what would actually be happening is I would have an input. It's connected to a data source. I can set a property called default to first result. And then every time I load the dashboard, that search is going to run. That input is going to have a default value. That default value is going to set a token. But if I remove it from global inputs, it's actually not going to show in UI. Do we want that to be the experience forever? Absolutely not. We are actively working on making that much better. But we did kind of get a heads up from the folks organizing this meeting today that it would be helpful to talk to kind of any tips and tricks that are useful. So that is one I definitely wanted to call out. Another thing I wanted to kind of make sure to spend a little bit of time on, because I find it super, super helpful, and I hope you guys do too. We put a lot of effort into this, is when you upgrade to the version of Enterprise with Studio, if you go to this examples hub, it was also in the beta app, but this is the new place to access it via the listing page. You actually are going to be able to get code snippets for all these different visualization types. Fun fact, that is my dog. A bunch of different search and data scenarios. So you heard me allude to, for example, that DS test data source, or packaging data right in the dashboard definition. So it doesn't matter what environment you're running this dashboard in, visualizations will always render. And you can see here that that's just defining, the different fields and column names. But what's really nice is if you just double click on this, you can copy paste. And if you go down to the bottom and you double click and copy paste this, you'll actually get the full dashboard definition for everything above that. So you'll get this all in your dashboard, and you can create that, and you can be off and running working with it. A couple of these examples that I do want to touch on, because I think that you guys in particular are going to find them very helpful, are So if we go to visualizations, I can't speak highly enough of the work Ryan O'Connor and a number of the different folks on our team have done in this arena. But where is SVG Choropleth? It's staring right at me. We made it a map. So if you come to this SVG Choropleth page, as this loads, you're actually going to find a lot of really cool examples where you're actually leveraging the properties of the SVG itself to do something really cool. So here you'll find a couple different examples. We had some friends in our Australia team looking to do a session. So we included an SVG of Australia, and that was really easy for them to then, point everybody to so that they could use. Map of Europe, also a very common one. And you'll notice here that a little bit of perspective applied here to the SVG. You can also see that there's some advanced tooltips here. Ryan is noting that is not a T-Rex. This is a T-Rex. There are some facts there. We get a lot of questions about custom tooltips, and we're certainly planning out how to make that more of a bespoke or more standard out of the box experience. But if you're looking to do something fun in the short term, can't recommend these enough. Also, this is just a great dog costume. And then of course, some of these bread and butter use cases where, I want to conditionally color, different buildings based on the signal strength, for example. Some California SVGs. This is a great one of the US if you ever want to kind of visualize the United States a little bit differently than normal. Another fun one in terms of conditionally changing how full this particular SVG is based on the data returned. So you'll notice here it's 53, so it's 53. If we reloaded this, it might be a different number. I think they're using a random function here. So if it was 77, you'd see that kind of fill up here. And similarly, this one's a fun one, a bunch of different patterns across the different Choropleth SVGs. So with that, I do want to talk a little bit about resources because I know Lizzie and I have covered a ton, and you can also include motion in your SVGs, motion and color. But let me talk about some resources because I'm sure you're getting tired of hearing me talk, and I'd love to kind of point you guys towards some folks who have done some really good work otherwise, and where you can kind of dive deeper on certain pieces. The first thing I want to call out is this Dashboard Studio editing experience demo. I will give Lizzie a big plug here. It's a great kind of walkthrough of how to get started building a dashboard through the Studio editor. A lot of folks you probably work with are going to use the Studio editor as it exists. They're not going to be kind of digging into the developer side of things or the framework. So that is a great asset to be able to kind of pass around just a quick 0 to 60 on how to get started. Those SVG Choropleths I pointed out, there are kind of full walkthroughs for how to get started with basically making those your own in these 2 blog posts. Hats off to Mr. Ryan O'Connor. He did a great job with those. And I got to say, when we were talking about building this visualization, I didn't know that it was going to get this creative. So that's fantastic. Another pointer to the NPM package, Splunk Dashboard Core. If you'd like to learn more about that publish to public URL capability, again, disclaimer, experimental, not supported. One, I'd ask you to submit a Splunk idea and kind of explain why that matters to you. We do look at that very frequently. 2, this is the GitHub repo for the project. And then 3, you can access the session recording and slides from Conf 2020 here. If you are curious about that custom time slider component, Jeff Hendry and Oddity Knot talked to that a little bit in their Conf 2019 session. I've included links to the recording in the slides. And if you are interested in that very awesome medical image viewer application that Atef wrote, I would direct you to take a look at the blog that he's written here, as well as note that he's leveraging just the standard React image gallery component. And he has also published the source code to Google Drive. All the disclaimers there that is not official product supported, but it is a very cool example, and hopefully it helps inspire some creativity. Last but not least, I will certainly say thank you for joining us today. Hopefully some of this information was helpful, and hopefully we're going to be hearing from a lot of you guys in the future. We'd love to hear from you on Splunk ideas, so ideas.splunk.com. Lizzie and I, the entire team, we look at those very frequently, so please do give us your perspective, upvote different ideas, submit new ones, add a little color in the comments as to why this is so important to you. We take all of that feedback very seriously, and we roll it into our priorities. So can't ask you enough to communicate with us through that channel. It really helps kind of democratize everyone's voice, but also make sure that we kind of have an idea which ideas have momentum and which ones are a little bit less critical to key workflows. Would also direct you to the Dashboards Studio at Splunk.com email address. Again, that's dashboard singular studio at Splunk.com. If you ever have any questions or feedback, or you want to hop on a call and discuss anything, that's monitored by Lizzie, myself, a few other folks. So if we can't answer your questions, we'll find you somebody who can. And also just, again, always happy to hear your feedback. If you're diving into the new framework, new Dashboard Studio, based on this talk today, that's awesome. And we'd love to know what your reactions are, good, bad, ugly. Even if it's something we're actively working on, we love to hear that it is an important thing for us to work on and that we should continue and we should do a really good job. So thank you so much for having us today. We both really, really appreciate it and can't wait to hear more about what you're building and how we can help.